Do you have what would be a formal dining room in decades past but want something more updated for you? Well, I decided to build my own in-home library. Once I demoed, I made one practice cabinet. I routed it down and didn't do a great job, so you can see I do learn, I promise. And I assembled my first cabinet. Now, I made some mistakes. I built it at countertop height when in reality it should have been desktop height, so I had to cut it down and then reassemble it. But once I was confident with my cuts, it was time to batch all my cuts. Basically, I just made a plan. I mapped everything out, even all of the cuts on my pieces of plywood, and then I routed that back channel for my back panel. Now, I did learn from that first one that I shouldn't do one pass. I needed to do 3 passes. Otherwise, I was going to break my router bit, which I definitely did. Now, once I had all of those cuts made, I was ready to go ahead and assemble everything. I assembled it all and even started on the upper part of the bookshelves, which is basically the same system, but at a larger scale. I used the stretchers to keep everything rigid, and those are what I screwed into the studs to make sure everything stays secure. But first I had to build a desktop, which I used all of this wood that I had in my basement that I acquired for free and then ran it through a planer, which saved me from all of the sanding. Now, to make the desktop look really nice and flat, I used a biscuit joiner and clamped everything together with the biscuits and a ton of glue. This makes for a really nice, flat, longer surface than if I had bought like a butcher board or something, and I got to use what I already had. To dress up the front of the bookshelves, I used 1x2s, and then I started making things up here. At the top of the bookshelves, I built out all of this framing to give me something to attach all of my molding to, and so I wanted to make a stacked crown molding look, so I added baseboards to the ceiling and the sides, and then used the crown molding to bridge the gap. It makes for a more grand look. Then it was time for painting. I sanded everything down, wiped it down, and started priming. I used this color called Milkweed Pod by Bear. I was a little nervous at first, but once it was done and layered, it looked so dang good. I added flooring and I started decorating the shelves, and I even updated my light. I love adding modern and vintage traditional elements together. I think it looks so good and it's such a fun balance. So basically the library was done, but it was missing just like that one final cozy element. So instead of that little desktop there in the middle, I decided I needed an electric fireplace. I built out the framing, added my concrete board and drywall, and I started cutting away the flooring because my goal here was to create the most realistic fireplace I possibly could, even though it was electric. I used framing or trim around the side, caulked it in, and then added my Dimplex Revolution firebox. It looks so good and so realistic, and I even started decorating for Christmas, and I am so happy with how the library turns out, and it's definitely the best spot in the house.